really pleased to introduce our next presenter, Heather Conroy. She's the Executive Director at Evolve Coaching, and she's going to speak about successful approaches to supports. Heather, thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Okay. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Good. So I'm really appreciative of the tone that Delane and Lou set so far today. I love both of them as individuals, but also love what they speak about. And hopefully some of the things will be a similar tone that what you hear from me. So it's interesting because Lou called me and said, we're having this really cool vendor fair and, will you come and have a table? And I said, sure. And then I think it was Patty or someone was like, so I hear you're speaking. I was like, oh, okay, great. So anyway, I was asked to, by the way, do I control this at all? Okay, I didn't get that lowdown. Got it. This is fun. I will see what I can do. So I was asked to talk about successful approaches. And so I guess what I have to say before I dive into anything is that, I have training I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I am a clinical social worker. And those two pieces of training got me only so far, and in fact, some of that meant more of that than you would believe had to be unlearned. But what got me to a place where I feel that the work that myself and my team at Evolve do, and I'll talk a bit about Evolve, is the result of learning from autistic people. And I think that it's really, I know, personally, I believe and I want to tell everyone, that you have to really open yourself up to learning. And as a clinician myself, like some of the things that I was taught, and even as I was being taught, I was questioning it. Not enough. Like looking back, I needed to question even more. But I would say that if you are a service provider or someone who's learning, or, even if you're well beyond it, we're always learning, and we're always learning from the individuals that we are lucky enough to support. So I've learned a lot from the folks that I work with and am in community with, including that sort of shift. One of many things that I've unlearned is using person-first language. And as Lou said, I may go back and forth throughout this discussion, just as she did, but I am working hard to unlearn some of those things, and I do use identity-first language for that reason. So, I did it. Okay. So I want to anchor this discussion in this toolkit, which was created with input from many, many autistic community members and other professionals, educators, things like that. So the conversation will be anchored in education environments, and maybe even specifically, the transition from high school to college. But much of this will apply, and I encourage you to consider how the things that I will show you today absolutely relates to various environments and thinking about work. And because we only have an hour, I may really lean into the education stuff. So just get creative as you think about some of these things, as I heard that many of you are, like hearing people in the hallway say, oh, I have all of these ideas. That's really a testament to Delane and Lou and what they've shared so far. Okay, so this is our toolkit, Supporting Autistic Students, a toolkit for educators and service providers. This will be available to you. In fact, at our table, we have a QR code. Apologies that I wasn't as thoughtful as Delane was to put one up on here. But at our table, there will be one, and we'll make sure, certainly the people online have access to the link, and the PDFs have the link. But if you go to our website, it's also just on the main page. It's available to everyone. As we talk about, you can scroll down just a bit. These folks in the back are being really, just the purple blocks. Yep. So we created the toolkit to help people in education environments. The toolkit includes a basic explanation of neurodiversity and autism, examples of challenges autistic people face in a world of ducks, and practical ways to change these settings, as well as suggestions for how to better support students. One thing to just keep in mind is the idea of universal design. which is nothing we talk about is ever perfect, but universal design is important because it allows us to think about what can we do for our environment to ensure that everyone can access it. We are setting up this discussion today with all of these lovely guests coming to speak and coming in person and visiting online and joining when they can. And that's one way, even though it's challenging and it's costly, it's bringing in more folks into the fold because we're thinking about how people come to us, right? Many people wouldn't be able to make it here, but they're here online. So that's really great. So just one example of an approach to universal design. So the toolkit was created specifically to help autistic students, but everyone learns in their own way. These tools can improve learning environments for all students. So we shall continue and we shall skip over the Heather video. Hello, there she is, but I'm in the room. We don't need that. And I really argued with our designers to keep that out, but it's in there. Okay. So quickly, who is Evolve? Evolve is a nonprofit organization. We began our work in 2014 as a nonprofit. I worked in this field since around 2006. In fact, the interpreter out in the vendor table area was my ASL teacher named Robin. She's a lovely woman. And in her classroom, I met someone who said, maybe you should be a TSS. They make $14 an hour. I was like, great, let me sign up immediately because that sounded like a lot of money. And then I got to meet such amazing, amazing human beings. I spent a lot of time with people. I met their families. I became part of their family. And even though I was going, I'm not allowed to do this. Like, I'm not allowed to know these things about the family. I'm not allowed to take a cookie from them that they homemade for me. I had to get over that. You have to make judgment calls. And I'm not, the School of Social Work may not love that I say that, but it's important to be a human being because we want to relate to the people that we're supporting. So I am not a clinician. I will say that for myself anyway, even though that maybe is sort of what we do not support elementary age students, only young adults and above. Yep. So 17 and up is typically who we support. So Evolve, we support college students, job seekers. We support a number of artists. And this goes back to what Delane and Lou both said about following folks' motivation. I'm not an artist. I would love to be. I'm not a filmmaker. I don't want to be a filmmaker. But we work with a lot of folks who care passionately about those things. And so we have built programs around the arts so that it's not about we are helping you to assimilate or feel comfortable in duck worlds. It's about what do you care about and how do we support you? And also, we're going to start scratching the surface on future planning while we're doing these things in the arts. So we're going to reward you or encourage you rather for the work that you've put into this artwork. We're also going to help you prepare for how you might parlay that into a gig or what you might put on your resume. And we're going to explain to people why that matters because no one's going to care why they would put, oh, I was in a show or, I worked on this film. No one cares really, if we're being honest, like that should go on a resume. So we have to explain why it matters. So some stats for us, I'm proud of the work that we've done. It matters less than the rest of the information in this toolkit, but 92% of Evolve's college clients do graduate from college. Does not mean that everyone graduates in 4 years, and that's okay. 90% of our job seekers find work. And that's huge because many of us in the room may know the numbers. They're sort of vastly different than what we see there. And I think it's really about taking time and spending the energy and putting in the effort that it takes to get to know people and really understand. People will say to me, oh, so do you place people in jobs? Heck no. We do not place people in jobs. I don't use that language because for me, it's about getting to know someone and understanding what they want to do and then helping them, just like anyone else, find a job that makes sense for them. However, as we think about, and I have similar thinking to Lou, I'm going to, divert a bit. I think it's important as we prepare someone for their future career, we are not limiting them to that future career. So you're passionate about PVC piping. Maybe you could be a plumber. There's a lot that could happen there. There's a lot that needs to take place before someone becomes a plumber, for example. And so sometimes we meet people who are 17 years old or 18 years old or 21 years old, and they've never worked, but they want to become a plumber. And because that has been the conversation, but there's been no conversation of how, and it's no one's fault. This is hard to do, and there's not enough time. So I want to just put that out there. But if no one talks about all the, like, working at the coffee shop, shadowing another plumber, asking people questions about the work that they do so that you could determine, oh, do I really want to do that? Like, lots of people I work with love animals and want to work in animal care until they see what that looks like. And they realize that the majority of that work is actually not spending time cuddling with the animals, even though that's also an important part of the work. So it's important for us to say, yeah, this is something that you care about. Let's figure out together what the path will be, but we have to educate you also on why sort of the steps that get you there are also important, and how they get you there. You have to connect those dots. I see some shaking heads, so you agree. Excuse me. Okay, so we can continue. The evolve is evolving. This is just, the point of this is that I fear putting things in, like, I would never write a book. I fear putting things down in paper. The researchers in the room really appreciate you, because, like, that is not a thing that I would do. I love that this is an online toolkit. I believe that it's more accessible. And as we pulled our community of educators in particular, so thank you if any of you in the room participated in our work here, online was most accessible to most people. I know that that does leave some people out. We're working on figuring that piece out, but this is always changing because language changes, because our society changes. And even since, I started my work in 2006 in this one field, wow, have things changed, and wow, have I had to adapt and be okay with that. So the methodology, more than anything, we found it important to interview autistic people. So we have survey information, we have focus group, and we have video, which you will see in a bit, from autistic people sharing what they wish that their school supports would have prioritized, what they wish they would have known now that they're in their 30s when they were in high school. It would have been really nice to know these things. And I think for me, even as a professional working with older adults, it's believe me, and as I share anything in this toolkit, please don't take it personally, because it's really easy for me to say, it would be really nice if in high school this happened, or before someone gets to college or work this happened. I'm very realistic about the fact that there is not enough time to do all of the things, but I think it's good for us to be aware of all the possibilities and then prioritize. So we also talked with parents. Of course, parents have a lot of input. They've seen people, grow throughout their lives, and also have feelings of maybe regret. I should have said this in that IEP meeting, or, I should have really encouraged therapy sooner, and just learning from parents what was important, as well as, of course, high school educators. And then disability service providers here on this screen really indicates university, college, post-secondary education disability service providers is who we involved in this process, because, we all are dealing with a limited amount of resources and time and knowledge. And a lot of what we heard from people was, I'd really love like a curriculum for how to support autistic people, or can you just tell me like how the brain works? And I think if Lou were able to say, here's how the brain works, one slide, here's some information, we leave it at that, I'd be okay with that. But autistic people don't want to feel that how their brain works. I don't know how the brain works of someone with OCD. I don't know how the brain works of someone with schizophrenia. Like, I have ideas, but I do not expect the same thing for other people. And it's just one more way to push autistic people away from, quote unquote, the norm. So it was so interesting. It was really enlightening for us to hear what people felt they need. And to me, that's okay. Like when people say, I really wish I had the right answer. I really wish I had a curriculum, or if someone could just explain to me the neurology. You know, it was enlightening, and it helped us to really push forth the message of this toolkit, which is overwhelmingly from autistic people: empathize with me. Understand what I'm experiencing, ask questions, ask me what I'm thinking, ask me what help I need, because I actually don't know when or how or from whom to ask for help. No one has taught me that. I don't learn that through observation. I need to be explicitly taught or told what's expected or how I can do that. So we can go on. Can you scroll down? Okay, so then there's this, there are glossary terms. We can mostly move forward here. Why don't you click on, please, the J through N? Throw in a wrench in. You guys got this, though. Okay. So just the top one, masking, because Delane brought this up. I figure, why not define it? We have a glossary of terms here. And I also want you to see that you can navigate through each box, because that isn't always intuitive to people. So masking is something that many autistic people do so that others will accept them. They may avoid stimming, some of the things that Lou mentioned earlier: rocking, making noises, doing things that are maybe when we think of stimming, we all do it, remember, but maybe autistic people go bigger. And they also know that it's not accepted. So they mask that. And how might that feel? If you're holding something in all day long at work or at school, you're going to be exhausted. I appreciated, I didn't love it at all, but I appreciated Delane being, sort of brave enough to share, like, I'm exhausted. It's exhausting. And you see here some language around the neurodiversity paradigm. And one thing that I just want to share: neurodiversity is very important. All brains are different, and we all need to exist. And the rainbow, like the conversation happening earlier this morning, has been really wonderful. It's very important to consider that we can all exist, and ducks and swans can coexist, and they can share the same lake and pond. I don't know. I'm terrible with metaphors, so I appreciate others in the room sharing that. But autism is also, and can be, disabling, right? And that is a fact, and it's part of the way that our society is built. So because we are not inclusive of swans, those swans have a hard time. And because we don't ask questions, and we're not supportive, and we don't go the extra mile to say, how can I help you? The traits of autism can be disabling because of the way our society is set up. So my point is that all of these things can exist together. The neurodiversity paradigm, different, not less, disability, all of those are okay words. It's okay to talk about disability. Okay, so we can continue. So, I think let's continue on. I'm so sorry, I missed the announcement. When will I be done here? I want to make sure that I'm tracking time. Is Patty, my friend, in here? 11:40 something, right? 11:40? Perfect. Thank you, everyone in the room. I didn't know if that changed, so I wanted to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to read this quote. So every time there's a quote, I would like to read that, and then we will also watch the videos. So quotes from autistic self-advocates are included throughout this toolkit to continue to anchor it in the voice of autistic people. Everything we see is about normal brain and, autistic brain. And, there's a reason for some of that, but it's also certainly stigmatizing, as Lou brought up earlier. I want you to hear from autistic people in this toolkit. So teaching professionals need to avoid overgeneralizing strengths and challenges in some areas into all other areas. Please do not mistake students' variable performances as reflective of effort or motivation. I wish teachers would have understood striving for perfection is not healthy, and the impact this was having on my mental health under the surface. Students are so much more than their grades and adherence to classroom rules. Okay. So we talked a bit about neurodiversity, and Delane also mentioned that for many, but we're still in a society that stigmatizes disability, period. in a society that doesn't understand autism, in part because we don't ask enough questions and we don't listen to autistic people. But for some people who get a diagnosis, it's a relief. It is enlightening. It is helpful. It's not a golden ticket, right? Because there's not just this sea of resources that open up, and people don't suddenly start to understand you, but you do start to get a little more information about who you are and why things have been challenging. And also what I hope is that, I hear a lot, parents and autistic individuals, when they go and get a diagnosis, they'll come back and they'll say, well, I have autism, but it's high functioning. Their clinicians are lessening the blow for them because they understand that there is a stigma. But the reality is that continues us down that path to keep talking that way. And I understand why it happens, and we're all just trying to do our best. But when I hear people say that, I just say, wow, like the ableism in that and the internalized ableism about that person's autism is just a bummer. And we have to help people to understand that diagnosis can be helpful, and it is a feature of them as an individual. And it is also makes things challenging because people don't understand all of their needs. Okay, continue. So we'll go to key takeaways. And this is the cue to hear or to play one of the videos. So there are 3 videos. Some of the folks who participated in our surveys were brave enough to also get on camera. They are very brief videos, just highlighting, we know what people's attention span is online, and just highlighting a few of their words. So go ahead and play that video, please, for key takeaways.
The most important thing I want you to know is that struggles aren't always on the surface. People might be trying really, really hard to keep it together. And if there aren't external signals that failure is happening, it can be really jarring when that hard work isn't noticed or valued.
I think they could give them more better materials, help them prepare better for tests.
I wish there could have been more preemptive measures to understand what I'm going through, being a man on the spectrum.
Just expand your horizons a little bit more, is what I would say, and try to reach out, again, filling them in their shoes, go in their shoes, and basically see what it's like being a person with autism. That's all I can really say.
I love the way Joe put that. And well, both Joes, actually. So Joe Smith and Joe Nath, both were really open about, man, it would just be really nice if people would have set up some preemptive measures. So what could people have done ahead of time, or how could people have anticipated my needs and understood me before I had to explain myself or ask for help? None of us is a mind reader, but we know when something is like amiss, right? We know when someone's struggling, and we may not know how to help, but we can put things in place. We can ask questions. So I loved the preemptive measures, and you'll meet Joe, and you will understand. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And then Joe Nath, I think it's so nice to hear echoed back what I'm sure he has heard all of his life. Just step into the other person's shoes, understand what they're experiencing. So we teach people who are autistic to empathize, but we don't empathize with autistic people enough. I mean, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I don't think that, my point is that I see people change, and I see that people are learning, and everyone is, again, doing their best, but there's a lot more that we can do. And we have to stop teaching people to move towards the center when we can move towards, the outside a little bit. The person over here from Pitt was talking about idioms, and maybe we just could avoid using them. I think there's a balance. I agree with Lou. We're kind of setting people up for failure if we don't teach them idioms and teach them. An idiom is really an example for all of the other things that we have to explicitly teach. That maybe we're not used to explicitly teaching, but we can make a compromise, and I think that's necessary. Okay, so Excuse me. So some other key takeaways from the work that we did on this project. So do assume that all of your students are competent. So assume competence, as Lou mentioned earlier, in different ways. And even if their behavior does not match your expectations. So because you see someone behaving in a way that you may not expect does not mean that they don't have the capacity or the intelligence or the experience that you might expect of someone. Do not assume that a student is not interested or does not care just because they're not making the progress you expect. If they're not making the progress you expect, it's your job to intervene, whether you're a parent or a provider or an educator. I should believe that this person can get there, and how can I help them get there? Not, oh, they have a learning disability, or they're autistic, or they have ADHD, and this is something that they're just going to struggle with forever. Yes, but also how can I help them and meet them halfway? Do not pity, apologize, or talk down to autistic students or individuals, period. And the reason this is called out is because the people who were interviewed and through our observation as coaches at Evolve Coaching, we just continue to see people use a different tone of voice when they're talking with someone with a disability, whether it's physical or invisible, and we know that that exists. Oh, hi, how's it going? You know, like we're trying to be gentle, we're trying to be welcoming, we're acting, and we all act, and it happens all the time. And but I think that unfortunately that still continues to be something that we see, and so it was something that we wanted to point out here. So how can you treat someone with the respect that they deserve, and just try and catch yourself? You know, I am not perfect either. I continue to catch myself in all of the little things that I do and say, I should have said that differently, or I shouldn't have made that assumption. And so if we're not continuing to look inward, I think that that's a problem. So scroll down, please. Thanks. Do not tell autistic people they do not look or seem autistic. So that goes back to the lessening the blow with a diagnosis. Oh, you seem fine. You don't seem autistic. Autism isn't a problem. So that's the shift that we have to make and we have to get comfortable with. Remember that receiving a diagnosis is positive for many autistic individuals. So Delane covered that well. So we can continue. Can you scroll down to the next quote? Okay, try to approach me, particularly when whatever I'm doing doesn't make sense to you or causes you to feel uncomfortable, with a spirit of, what happened? What's happening? Rather than what's wrong with you. And no one in this room is going to say what's wrong with you. I mean, maybe we would if we're actually concerned about someone's safety or making sure that they're okay. But the feeling is what's wrong with you when we say other things. Center me and problem solve with me. This is huge, and if I leave myself enough time, I will share a bit more about it later, but in case I don't, some students don't have very much experience advocating for their needs. So we have a lot of folks who, for many reasons, because of the systems that are created, I mentioned there just isn't not enough time to do all the things before someone graduates high school. So again, very sensitive to that. But it leaves students unprepared for the transition. And so this is what we spend the most of our time doing, is helping people to advocate, helping people to live in the future a little bit and think about, well, what help might I need in that classroom, for a future assignment, at work next week when my shift changes? What are all the things that I might need? And how can I ask for help, and who can I go to for help? So later we'll talk about literal language, and I know we talked about it earlier as well. You might hear from a supervisor on the first day of work, I have an open door policy, come on in anytime. One, that's an idiom, but it's pretty straightforward. All right, the door's always open. I can go in and I can ask questions of this supervisor anytime. But is that usually the case? The unwritten rule is that no, you're not going to go to your supervisor with every question that comes up. You're going to find a point person at work, maybe. You're going to find someone in a similar role who you can say, hey, what's the expectation here? Hey, how does the lunch break actually work? You know, I see in the handbook there's a lunch break from 12 to 1, or I can take a break whenever I need one. And all of that is really unclear to me. So like, what are the rules? So we in general, we have to really start thinking about, I love the idea of, like, later I'll talk about being in the IEP meetings at 14, because that's when transition starts. And I don't have the privilege of having been to many IEP meetings. I love the idea of them going in 2nd and 3rd grade. That sounds great. Please do that if that's easy to do. Again, even if it's just for a little bit of exposure, you're welcome here. Your voice matters. And then someone comes out, because we spend so much time even just convincing students and job seekers that you can ask for help, and that you need to ask for help. You're worthy of help. So that is our biggest issue at Evolve, is preparing people for that. So we have to think creatively about how we can prepare people to start doing that much sooner, even though parents have so much work to do getting the resources and services that individuals need. Every time you do something, how can you include that person in the conversation? The person that you're supporting, they just need to understand what's going on. Next video. We can watch this next video, please.
I would say that I had trouble putting pieces together. I was so stressed with everything, like I didn't know, I was trouble paying attention to everything.
Sometimes they have trouble concentrating and they get overwhelmed when there's an exam, like when they're trying hard. I know because I've been there, and the work got much harder for me. Like I got F's, and then I was almost told I was going to get kicked out, but then I decided to get a better major and then turn my degree around.
Sensory challenges and stuff, like dealing with people's tone of voices and stuff in a way.
Like the social sensory interoception thing of saying, can I go to the bathroom, and taking care of that need was like not possible for me to like process and execute. So sort of sensory executive dysfunction stuff.
Okay, so this section is about assumptions, and I really loved AK's call out of my interoceptions, my ability to understand the cues from my own body, like weren't telling me that I needed to go, like I have to go to the bathroom now. But also, when it's not explicitly stated, here are the rules for going to the bathroom, and it is in for young kids, but then when you get to high school, maybe that goes away, and it's assumed people know what to do. If they need to go to the bathroom, here are the rules. But if it's not discussed, then that can be a challenge. And if working with someone younger who is still kind of understanding all of that stuff, if we don't make space for, okay, this is when the break is happening, this is when these things will happen, and helping people prepare and prompting people for things that they might need if we notice. I mean, this is something that I do with our students, like, have you slept? Have you eaten? Have you had anything to drink? Have you gone to the bathroom? Like, those are still things that people in their 20s may need to be reminded of, because they've got so many other things going on as well. They're thinking about school, they're trying to uphold all of the expectations that the Duck Society kind of puts on them. Growing up as an undiagnosed autistic kid in the education system was incredibly difficult, largely due to the adults in my life who could not or would not even begin to understand why I was struggling. When I got to high school, my grades quickly dropped and I was struggling way more. It was hard for me to get work done outside of school, and I couldn't keep up with assignments. Instead of being offered help or even asked what was going on, I was constantly told by many of the adults in my life that I was just lazy. So certainly people have heard this, right? That people with ADHD are lazy, people with autism are lazy, or just that person is lazy because they're not getting the thing done, regardless of a disability label. And so that's a hard quote to read, but I think it's really important to remind people that this is still the message that is sent, even though we're learning more and we're doing everything that we can do. So I'm going to breeze through, but I will name them, some of the challenges autistic people face. So that lack of independence is really the result of us just not having the capacity to, but needing to find that capacity to prepare people to be more independent, and believing in them that they can if we give them the tools. The false belief that accommodations hurt learning, No, they give someone an equal playing field, or they allow them that equal playing field. So we really need to get out of that mindset. Sensory experiences, expectations of time management. Thank you so much. You don't have to open these. I appreciate it. But for the next one, that would be great, just for the sake of time. Assumptions about sensory regulation. There is the assumption that, well, people don't need to rock or make those noises that I don't like or that are distracting to me. They don't need to do it. They're choosing to do it. They're choosing to pace in the classroom, and they don't need to, and they need to stop because that isn't the expectation in this classroom or at work. But that's not the case. Vague instructions is a really big one. So notice that these aren't all traits or like inherent attributes of autism, right? It's traits of our society. Okay, let's continue to tools. This is going so smoothly. What a production company back there. Okay, Joe, did you know that you would be the star of the show before you even started? Okay, so we're going to talk about tools. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and play this one.
They tell you explicitly what to do, like stand in line this way, sit in your desk this way, do this homework, and it didn't occur to me to not do those things. I think that like the breakdowns that I experienced later kind of occurred because I didn't really get to explore my own ability to like function outside of a system of rules. Like I had one friend in elementary school, and when she wasn't in my class, like in my grade, I didn't have any friends.
Like with autistic people, it's like, oh, if he's autistic, that means he might have trouble doing stuff and can't have a job. Or he's just stupid, or that person is clearly not fit to live in the real world.
If people can't accept me for being autistic or something, then that's their prerogative. But I have things to do or something, and people need education, so people need to be included.
Joe, you do got things to do. It's true. Yeah. So again, with AK, talking about the sort of expectations and like almost the great things about school, because there's this sameness and there's a routine, and then beyond that, oh man, it's hard. I have to figure this out on my own. I also have to figure out friendships on my own. Speaking for myself, I was in every sport that I could be in. And that was really important to me, and that is how I built friendships. But I didn't have close friendships. I kind of kept people, at arm's length. I'm so noticing all of my idioms. I just want to say that. But it was really important to me to have the structure, to have the people around me. And one, that's kind of what I needed. I didn't need a whole lot more. But two, if I'm being honest, I didn't know how to do it. Like, I played sports. I understood that. I knew how to talk to the people at the sporting events, and I knew how practice works. And of course, there's so many good things about sports, including the social piece. And when I didn't have that, that was like, oh, what do I seriously? I'm going to call someone from like, my parents were like, you're going to call Tom from this class and you're going to have a conversation and then you guys will hang out. What? So I tried it and that was terrible. It was like, I don't think like, and we see things on TV, like a lot of the folks we support, one motivation of many that they're thinking about is like dating. And the idea is, well, what I see on TV is like how people date, and it's not that at all. And I'm not a dating coach. I will admit that. I avoided dating, and I think many people do, because it is so unpredictable and there is no right way to do it. And it's really hard to help autistic people to understand, like, okay, here are the steps you can take, but also like you can't actually ask the person out because that's a little bit weird and too upfront. Maybe if you see them, you can say hi. And then you could like comment on their shirt, but you can't comment on their shirt because it makes them look sexy. You can comment on their shirt because you like the color of it, or because you both like Star Wars. So there are all of these nuances. So I'm totally going on a tangent right now, but I think it's interesting and important. that there are so many tools that we don't think about, that we have to try to give people, or things to explain to people, that they will not be able to learn just through observation. Yeah. So try to find ways to have fun with me. That often means that excuse me, I'm doing my best. That often means that you do what I'm doing, talk about what I'm talking about, play in the manners I want and like to play. This makes me feel safe. Feeling safe is so very important. So feeling safe is something that it took me a long time, like, again, I started doing this work in 2006, maybe like 5 years ago, I started to really understand the value of, I need this person to just find me reliable. Not just, but above all else, this person needs to know that I'm going to stay and that I am here for them. And that if I do need to go, because that's important too, like sometimes we have to end those relationships, or jobs change, but I'm going to make sure that that person is prepared with it enough notice, and also like who can that person connect with after me, and I'm going to make that handoff happen. So all of that is really important, and it just became so obvious to me way too late, how I just needed to show people that they can kind of melt down in front of me, and that I'm not judging them, and that I'm still here for them, and I'm going to wait for that to stop, and I'm going to say, what can I do for you? So that's really big. Okay, so let's continue to talk about some tools. These ones I will let you expand, please, and I will do my best to move quickly. So, use students' interests as a gateway to further learning. Follow the passions. This was discussed today. It is very important. I don't want to say this the wrong way. I'm not proud to tell people that I have a certification in behavior analysis. I will leave it at that. It's not something that I'm proud of. But something that I was lucky to learn was that I need to play with people and find ways to teach while I'm doing that. And that, I think, translates into our arts programs, which again, I'm way out of my comfort zone. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to paint this way, or, how to edit and do filmmaking. But what I know is that I'm going to let them lead, and that I'm going to go with them. So that's something that I found really valuable from that behavioral training, because I was literally out on the playground, being with people, noticing what people needed, and doing my best to support them in that moment, and pepper in, teachable moments. Give specific feedback that is mostly positive. So if you don't tell, another thing that was a hard learn, because I'm a nice person, or I try to be, is that if I don't tell someone, that no one will. So the work that I do with adults really began at Carnegie Mellon. We saw a lot of students at Carnegie Mellon. I'll tell you about the stigma that still exists, because when I tell our origin story of Evolve, they say, "What? Carnegie Mellon?" I say, "Listen, but I'm also not saying everyone's a savant and everyone's at Carnegie Mellon. Like, that's not the story, but it's telling that's still the response that I get." But these folks were are so smart. And we talked about electrical and computer engineering, which I still, and also then, know nothing about. But I understood that I needed to tell them things about the expectations in the classroom, the expectations with their roommates that had the chance to hurt their feelings, but I had to do that really kindly. And I had to give that feedback really specifically and explicitly. So that's maybe the takeaway from that. So support multiple ways to share and receive information. We'll talk about that a bit on the next slide. Communicate clearly. We talked about that a great deal today, so thanks Lou and Delane for that. Be patient. These things take time. We can't expect people to learn, a lifetime of skills in a brief period of time. What we expect college students, if we just continue to anchor the conversation in education, like what we expect college students to learn between the year 18 and 19 is insurmountable and wild, and we need to like really step back and think about that. Explain the big picture. Always connect those dots. Explain to people why you're doing the things you're doing, or asking them to do the things that you expect of them. Support movement and breaks. Allow extra time for assignments and tests. We talked about accommodations. Provide extra support. And back to accommodations and that extra support, sometimes we have to ask people what they need, and sometimes people do not know what they need. And so we have to get to know them and understand how we might be able to help them. Offer more control, include people in those IEP meetings, for example. Always find ways to allow people to order for themselves at a restaurant. You know, maybe they're 7. They can still teach them to order for themselves, get them used to those sorts of things. And give people choices. You know, it's not, you're going to do this thing. Give them a choice so they can start to flex that muscle. Provide private housing on campus. We won't get into that, but private housing can be really helpful, excuse me, and is a good accommodation. And many autistic people who participated in this survey felt very strongly about that. And I agree with them. Leave white space on documents. Keep it simple. Provide more transition time, and connect students with networks of peers. So I think we can, well, go ahead and scroll down. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. If you want to help and don't know how, you should ask. And I'll read the last quote. So, to be treated with sincere empathy and given some level of agency, to feel like someone actually cares about what my needs are rather than treating them like an inconvenience. To have someone work with and treat me like another human being rather than a charity case or a problem student. To actually be told that I wasn't the problem and that there was nothing wrong with me as an individual, from an autistic advocate as well. Okay. And so this toolkit has additional resources again. Anju, can you raise your hand over here? She's womaning the table in the vendor area. So there is a QR code to the toolkit. And again, it's also on our main page of our website. Okay, so we can exit out of here. I'm going to breeze, y'all. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so a couple of questions just to pose, and I do welcome participation. So, okay, how can you create a lesson plan that considers many types of learners? Let's go ahead and open up the next ones. So example, you want to teach a young person about budgeting. What are some things that you could do? Explain why having money matters, and don't assume that all students observe financial transactions, which, by the way, there's nothing to observe anymore. We're clicking around on a computer. Our knowledge of how dollars work allows us to conceptualize what we're doing on Amazon, you know. That is not, it's non-existent. And if we teach people to count money now, it's like, that's still not enough, and it's not going to click, and actually maybe won't be super helpful because they're not getting that actual experience counting money. So if you're like going through coins and dollar bills and $5 bills, like there's a place for that, but it's actually so little of what we do in real life. And if you are in a classroom, you can introduce this idea, just like introducing an idiom per week to the whole class. You can reduce the anxiety in the room for those who aren't caught up by starting an accessible entry point for everyone. So, what is a budget? And talking to people about what a budget is, which, by the way, is complicated and a long conversation. And there's a video of what a budget is on number 2, which will be available to you. And then the universal design approach, you know, making sure that you are thinking about the various ways people input information, and also ensuring that you have a hands-on option for people to learn. And so again, it isn't just counting money, it's swiping a card, it's going onto a website, and it's also checking a bank account. You know, there are so many interesting new steps that I don't envy teachers for having to teach now. Okay, let's go ahead for number 2. So how can school teams and autistic young people work together to prepare? Allow full participation in IEP meetings, or small exposures as well, like getting people used to being in that room and understanding that that room is a safe place, and making sure that you make it a safe place for the person is really important. at the latest, age 14, we want to start talking about transition, and we want to absolutely make sure that that person's in the room. Teachers and all people in the room, parents too, make sure that you speak directly to the students and allow the students to speak for themselves, and give people time. Once you ask a question, you're asking huge questions in a room like that. Give people time to cry, give people time to, pause and think for a really long time. And then if you need to ask a question a different way, that's an accommodation you could make rather than saying it again the same way or louder. If you have an IEP, always include a goal that addresses self-advocacy. I think I hit that home a little bit earlier. Self-advocacy is extremely important. And so you don't have to write self-advocacy, like student will self-advocate. But you do have to make sure that you have things like student will, order at the cafeteria, and, things that are clear examples of advocacy that won't just translate if we don't talk about how they'll translate, but they're a starting point. Consider all paths. Anji will like this one. Work and post-secondary education options should be in many students' futures, not either or. And again, I'm so sympathetic of all the things that have to happen in the school environment before someone transitions, but we need to include both. And we also know really well that, the chances for success increase greatly if someone has work experience while they are still in high school. And so it's important to find ways to do that. Clearly identify what can happen in school and what can happen outside of school. So if there are gaps, this thing isn't happening in school, we have to get creative about what can happen outside of school, because the reality is that our systems don't allow for everything to be trained there. Okay, continue. I have 5 minutes left. I'm aware of that. Okay, so supports. So then we get back to what are successful supports, which is such a big topic. Again, I think if you can empathize, that is the best thing that you can do. And you can, as a parent, as a teacher, as someone in someone's corner, you can require that all of the people supporting your person that you are in service of is being respected, and that people are empathizing with them. So you can set the tone and you can be a model for other people. Respect the individual and prioritize their wishes. Be creative and thoughtful. So some of those quotes really show that creativity is important. Be regularly scheduled rather than as needed support. So I learned really quickly that as a therapist or a coach, if I say, let's meet on Tuesday, and then we meet on Tuesday, we have a good meeting, and then we say, okay, just call me when you need the next meeting. Do you want to just let me know what your schedule is? And, we're out of time, so just get in touch with me. They're never coming back. So, and even if you do schedule, they still might not make it, and you have to put some preemptive measures in place. You need to make sure that your supports include encouragement. You want to promote success rather than test for success or failure. So this is something that's I do want to push. So we want to help people succeed. We want to show people that if they listen to some of the ideas that we have, and we can be wrong, but if we are trying to help someone do something, we need them to have the evidence that it works. And so if we set them up for failure because we want to see how they'll do, there's a time and a place for that, but we want to really start with helping that person see it does work. If you put in the effort, it works. It maybe moves the needle a little bit, and here's the evidence. And here's why continuing to try this could be valuable to you. If we say, let's just put him in the workplace and see how he does. I'll just observe first. That's setting them up for failure potentially, and they may not want to come back the next day. So we prompt and we support, and then we move back and we check in and we say, how are you doing? Do you need help in this way? Is there anything I can do for you? Let me work alongside you. If we're working with someone in an environmental services job, we can put gloves on and we can participate because it's going to be helpful. Accommodate unique learning styles. Don't involve punishment. It's just not necessary. Involve parents very thoughtfully with an eye towards greater independence and a typical reliance on family, which none of us has a typical family story, but we want to get close to a place where people aren't permanently reliable on family because things happen, and family isn't around forever. And so we have to just continue, just like we put off the will. I know this is an easy thing to put off, but we have to keep it in mind. Okay, next slide. Okay, finally, it's important to build a team. So we talked about the co-occurrence of mental health diagnosis is around 70% that we know of for autistic people. So we need to make sure that services are in place. When people come to us, sometimes I find that they have no other support. And so part of my job is to get them connected to, this is service coordination. You have anxiety, you have depression. Service coordination can help you in these ways. And then I call the service coordination team and I say, listen, here's what this person needs. Because if I let them, it's kind of like setting them up for failure again. If I just let them go in and meet with someone who's often, fresh in the field, the person's going to say, well, what do you need? And then the individual is going to say, I don't know. I think I'm fine. Heather told me to come here. And then they go home and then they don't set goals and they don't go back to service coordination. So I have to say, listen, this person's going to make you think they don't need anything and they need some support. We can work together. Here's what this is going to look like. Social. So replicate the structured systems. I talked about how I understood social in one realm of life, and that was sports. And then what do I do after that? How does that work? Well, you can find adult sports to play. How can you continue the thing that you love and be around people and build those relationships? There are online options, and those are also valid. It is valid to build relationships online. There is always a balance. You can't stay in one room all the time, of course, but we want to validate those social relationships that are online as well. They're very important. Work. So OVR is something that many of you may have heard of, but they're at the vendor table as well. If you didn't stop there, they can provide people direct services, but then also connect people to existing services. Like Evolve is one example. Achieva, the ARC of PA. There are others in the room that I probably didn't notice, but they are here too. Job shadows and informational interviews, asking people what it's like to have the job that you have, and having those conversations and learning that you do have to pick up poop if you're playing with animals. That's part of the job, and you have to be okay with that. And this is really funny. I can't wait to correct my mistake on this slide. But so waivers, supports coordination. We have done work with DPW, but that is DHS. I was reading that earlier, preparing a little bit, and I thought, oh, that's funny. Department of Public Works is great. We've had lots of people really interested in trash collection and stuff, and we have photos on social media of our folks taking a field trip there, and they've been really wonderful to partner with. But DHS is the system that's part of where you'd find the waivers. I heard someone kind of ask that question, what is DHS? So Department of Human Services. And one of the things that I'm not a waiver expert, but one of the things that I really like that I see people do are these person-centered plans. So again, we're centering the individual. We're not saying, well, I'm Heather and I have a clinical social work license and here's what I think. It's like, Joe, Delane, what do you care about? What is your good life? What do you want? How can we help you or not help you? How can we get out of your way, and how can we be supportive to you? Okay, the next slide is resources. You can connect with us. I'm sorry I went 2 minutes over. Would you like to stop? Would you like me to see if there are questions? Okay, Patty's so nice. Okay. Yeah, happy to take questions if you have any.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on my way.
Do we service Westmoreland County along with Allegheny? Okay, so Evolve Coaching, I would love for some other providers to do more work with adults. And you mentioned a great one as well. We predominantly work with Allegheny County. We work with people who go to colleges all around the country, actually. And so that's virtual support. If someone's in Westmoreland County, that would look like let's say they go to, they go to St. Vincent, great. So we would absolutely say, come to our office, meet with us. Maybe once a month we can meet in person. We can find a way to do that, but that would be a virtual support. And we wouldn't go to Westmoreland County, to do like on the job support either. It's just like outside of our capacity. But good question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. People are ready for lunch. I feel it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your attention, everyone. Oh, sure. Do I have any partnerships
with the school districts?
Sorry, thanks. Do we have partnerships with the school district? We have. So what Evolve does, let me just try and you can feel free to leave the room if you are like, I need a break. I'm okay with that. So we have had to make a really hard decision to choose our lane, which is high school, like beyond high school. And I'll say that we have 20 staff members and we are at full capacity doing that. That said, the toolkit is our attempt at trying to bridge that gap a little bit more. And something that we do have the capacity to do is conversations, going through the toolkit, doing these sorts of workshops and presentations like today. But beyond that, it's just, again, that's beyond our capacity. We have we currently 105 college students that we are supporting at this very moment, which is that's a lot for us. And around 75 job seekers at any time. So unfortunately, there just aren't enough people really specializing in that age group that we've had to make that call to really stick to that group of people. But thank you for the question. And that's what that could look like with a high school district. Cool. Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Are we able to support kids at Hiram G. Andrews? It's not been needed, but yes. Yep. We haven't run into that need because they do have great supports. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather.